They didn't even let me finish my sandwich. The COO stood over me, flanked by the HR director like a smug honor guard. I knew that look: tight smile, fake regret. The kind of face people make right before they slide a knife between your ribs and call it a strategic pivot. My name is Nathan Ellery. I'm 47 years old. And until 23 minutes ago, I was the senior systems architect at Artisan Technologies. 19 years of building their digital backbone, designing infrastructure so reliable it became invisible. That's the curse of doing your job too well. People forget the fire drills you prevented, the crises you solved before they started. They start to think the fire never existed. The COO, Greg Ballard, cleared his throat and delivered the line like it was a eulogy. Due to ongoing organizational changes, your role no longer exists. I looked up at him, then at Melissa from HR, who avoided my eyes. She always avoided hard things. This was probably the hardest thing she'd done all year. I didn't say a word, didn't ask why, didn't remind them that I'd personally recruited the guy who built their current automation framework, or that I'd stayed through the 2016 crash while the CTO ran off to a competitor, or that when their lead developer quit mid-rollout last year, I worked 80-hour weeks to keep the project afloat. None of that mattered now. Security will escort you as you remove your belongings, Greg added, like he was reciting a spell that might ward off lawsuits. I nodded once, calm, measured. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't be twisted later. My reward for nearly 2 decades of service was a plastic visitor badge and a cardboard box. I left my half-eaten sandwich on the table. They didn't even give me time to shut down my terminal. IT had already locked me out. My email, disabled, my credentials, revoked. The speed of it made it clear. This wasn't a snap decision. They'd planned it, probably rehearsed it, maybe even celebrated it. As I walked the long hallway to my office, the security guard trailing behind me like a silent shadow, I caught snippets of conversation. Coworkers pretending not to notice, others stealing guilty glances. No one spoke to me, not even Jenna, who I once coached through her first real system crash, calming her down at midnight while she cried over corrupted data. My office was stripped of anything personal within minutes: a couple of framed certificates, a worn leather notebook, a mug from my first major rollout. I left the picture of my ex-wife in the drawer. She wouldn't care anyway. On my way out, I paused by the elevator and looked back one last time. The place still hummed with fluorescent light and quiet keystrokes, a world I had built from the ground up. I had woven myself into its circuits and silence, only to be unceremoniously deleted. But I wasn't angry, not yet. That came later. Right then, all I felt was cold clarity. Outside in the parking lot, the wind was sharp, stinging my cheeks. I stood for a moment beside my car, box in hand, and watched the building. The logo gleamed in the sunlight. Artisan Technologies, proud and polished. I remembered when we were just a startup with mismatched furniture and coffee-stained whiteboards. I remembered the first pitch deck I designed that won us our initial seed funding, the data models I'd drawn on napkins, the hours I gave them, the loyalty. I drove home in silence, no music, no calls, just the low hum of my thoughts, looping, rewriting. I didn't ask, why me? I already knew. I'd become too old, too expensive, too outspoken. I didn't speak in hashtags or post daily thought leadership threads. I just worked, solved problems, mentored people. I was the foundation. And in their shiny new world, foundations weren't sexy. That night, I poured a drink and went to the study I rarely used. It was quiet there, a room I'd built for deep thinking back when I thought I'd write a book someday. Instead, I pulled out a dusty roll of blueprint paper, one of the few things I'd kept from Artisan's early days. The original network architecture diagram, my signature in the corner, dated August 2007. I sat there a long time, staring at those lines and nodes, remembering what each one meant, who helped build them, who I helped build. Then I whispered, not out of bitterness, but with calm, grounded certainty, "They've just mistaken the architect for the wall." And that was their first mistake. The silence of my home office was a different kind of hum. No Slack pings, no calendar alerts, no Greg Ballard forwarding me half-baked strategy slides at 11 p.m. Just clean air, quiet hardwood, and the low creak of my chair as I leaned back and stared at the blank whiteboard in front of me. It had been 4 days since I was escorted out of Artisan Technologies, and already the shock was gone. What lingered was something sharper, not rage, too loud. This was colder, like the pause between the blueprint and the build. That moment when you know what's coming, and no one else does. I slid open the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a weathered folder labeled Legacy Stack Personal. I knew what was in there before I even opened it. Original design notes from a freelance project I'd worked on 2 years before joining Artisan. The irony? That same code had become the foundation for Artisan's early platform. Legally, it had remained mine, buried under NDAs and polite lies, but mine all the same. They'd adapted it, of course. Greg loved to call it collaborative IP. But I remembered every semicolon, every query. Beside it was a USB drive in a protective case, labeled Phase 0. It contained proprietary modules I'd written independently and pitched internally, only to be told they were too advanced or not aligned with the product vision. A year later, I saw them buried in a release update, stripped of credit. I made a list, not out of spite, but precision. Every slight, every discarded innovation, every idea stolen, every system I'd patched without thanks. Then I underlined one name, Archer Vale, my first protege, bright, tenacious, wildly unfiltered. He used to barge into my office with half-built scripts and wild-eyed theories. I cleaned up his chaos. He sharpened my edge. Then he left Artisan after a messy reorg and joined a small cybersecurity firm called Virion. Last I heard, they were scaling fast, agile, private, smart enough to fly under the radar. I messaged him on Signal, one line, "Coffee this week?" He replied in less than a minute, "Name the place." We met at a cafe we used to haunt during late-night debug marathons. He looked leaner, sharper, still wore his hair like a hacker out of a 90s thriller. As soon as I sat down, he grinned. "Took them long enough to screw you over." I smirked. "You saw?" "Melissa from HR has a cousin who drinks too much. Word got around." We danced around the topic at first. He talked about Virion's latest acquisition. I nodded politely. Then he leaned in. "You planning to consult now? Go solo?" "Something like that," I said. Small, specialized, quiet. His eyes gleamed. "They won't see you coming." I didn't say yes. I didn't have to. We both knew what this was. That night, I drove out to a rented storage unit I hadn't visited in years. Back when I thought I might start my own firm, I'd boxed up research, design plans, skunkworks projects that never got greenlit. Most of it was analog, on purpose. No chance of digital fingerprints or convenient deletions. I unlocked the metal door. Dusk greeted me. So did a stack of labeled bins, file folders, hand-drawn network maps, and old laptops wiped clean but intact. I moved slowly, methodically, sorting through the bones of a company I almost started. Now, it was time to finish what I'd shelved. Back home, I cleared my office, took down the framed certificates, wiped the whiteboard. Then I wrote 3 words in black marker. Phase 1, bleed. I wasn't interested in burning Artisan to the ground. Fire is messy, noticeable. What I wanted was to make them bleed quietly, drain their edge, expose their gaps, remind them that no one is irreplaceable, except the person they replaced. I registered a shell company in a low-disclosure jurisdiction, no name tied to me, just a quiet firm offering discrete operational recovery consulting for companies in transition. My pitch: diagnosing and solving the kind of structural misalignments that occur when firms over-optimize their leadership pipelines. In other words, the messes caused by insecure executives firing the people who built the damn place. I seeded the company with archived white papers and tailored modules, stripped of identifying marks but written by me. I used VPNs, layered proxies, and cold email campaigns to quietly enter the consulting ecosystem. Archer introduced me to 2 small clients bleeding from the same wounds I'd once patched. I fixed their issues in days. Word spread, carefully, through private channels. I made sure of it. I didn't need to scale fast. I didn't need to be known. I just needed one client to bite. Artisan would be perfect. They just didn't know it yet. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I always preferred mine precise. The offer came in through a referral channel I'd groomed for weeks. A mid-tier management consultant I'd helped quietly behind the scenes recommended our shell firm, Catalyst Axis to an executive recruiter. That recruiter happened to be working with Artisan Technologies. Apparently, they were experiencing post-restructure friction. That's corporate speak for everything's broken and no one knows why. A day later, a meeting request popped up, sent not to me, of course, but to one of our senior liaisons, a woman I'd coached on how to pitch Catalyst Axis with just enough polish to seem real and just enough obscurity to feel exclusive. They wanted a proposal. They'd heard good things. Of course they had. The meeting was virtual. I was never on camera, never even acknowledged. I watched from behind an alias, logged in as a passive technical advisor. The lead consultant did the talking, using language I wrote. The words were surgical, intelligent without being condescending, urgent without sounding alarmist. We presented a streamlined system upgrade plan that seemed like a rescue but was really a reckoning. The irony? They recognized the proposed architecture as innovative, even though it was 70% based on the framework I'd built years ago. Same bones, different skin. I listened as their CTO, a new hire named Dinesh, fumbled through questions he clearly didn't understand. He was fresh off a transformation project at a fintech startup that burned out in under a year. He spoke in buzzwords, nodded at phrases like modular redundancy and predictive sync optimization, as if he understood what they meant. Greg Ballard was there too, quiet in the corner square of the Zoom grid, chin resting on his hand. I wondered if he recognized any of the syntax. Probably not. People like Greg rarely read the details. They delegate, then blame. When the presentation ended, they asked for a proposal and a preliminary diagnostic. I had it in their inbox within 2 hours, pre-written, pre-scanned, scrubbed of fingerprints but laced with seeds. The next phase was trickier: access. They gave us limited credentials to review key components of their infrastructure. The accounts were supposedly sandboxed. I built the tools myself to bypass the wrappers, quietly, efficiently. I wasn't breaking in. I was walking through doors I had designed. Inside, the damage was worse than I imagined. Half-finished integrations, abandoned APIs, legacy code patched by junior devs using outdated libraries. Systems were talking to each other through bottlenecks I warned about 3 years ago. It was like watching someone take a sledgehammer to a watch and wondering why it didn't keep time. I documented everything, not just the bugs and the inefficiencies, but the violations, the missteps, the shortcuts that now violated updated compliance standards. They'd cut corners trying to modernize without understanding the original blueprint. The result was a Frankenstein system full of ghost protocols and broken safeguards. I didn't fix anything yet. I just took notes, created backups, collected receipts, every overlooked update, every misaligned permission, every change approved without testing. I encrypted it all and stored it offline. Ticking time bombs, hidden under their own signatures. They reviewed our full proposal a week later. It was pitched as a modular efficiency overhaul with a 3-phase implementation timeline. It included redundancies that would appear functional, but were inherently fragile under stress. Not illegal, not even unethical, just poorly suited to the reality they refused to admit, that they'd built a house on a cracked foundation. Greg signed off first. Dinesh followed, eager to prove his decisiveness. Legal glanced over it and approved with minor edits. No one asked who I was. No one looked hard enough. They saw what they wanted to see: a life raft. It was surreal watching them welcome me back through the front door, blindfolded, thanking me for the privilege. They never knew they'd handed me the detonator. They just thought it was a flashlight. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. This wasn't about ego. It was about design. I was doing what I'd always done, solving problems. Only now, the problem was them, the arrogance, the erasure, the belief that you can discard the architect and expect the building to stand. That night, I updated the whiteboard in my office, erased Phase 1, bleed, and wrote something new. Phase 2, reveal. They'd approved the plan, they'd given me access, and they had no idea what came next. It started with a lag. A customer service dashboard froze for 38 seconds, long enough for 3 tickets to fail. The incident was flagged but dismissed as a minor cloud hiccup. That was Tuesday. By Thursday, the billing module began skipping transaction confirmations. Not failing, just skipping. Their finance lead chalked it up to a reconciliation delay. Their logs disagreed. Payment records were misaligned across instances. Refunds processed to the wrong vendors. Internal ticketing jittered. Still, no alarms were pulled. Not yet. I watched everything unfold from my dashboard. External to them, invisible, but connected through layers of access they themselves granted. They thought Catalyst Access was monitoring progress. In a way, we were. Just not in the way they understood. By Friday morning, a compliance manager finally flagged something real, an inconsistency in the data handling protocols. She noticed a data field being written twice in the audit logs. Redundant writes that, when aggregated, violated GDPR data minimization rules. She pinged the CTO. The CTO panicked, not because he understood the violation, but because someone else did. That afternoon, I was copied anonymously into an email thread with the subject line, Urgent, Platform Degradation and Legal Exposure. It contained screenshots, logs, and a vague request for an expedited fix from Catalyst Access. I didn't respond. They escalated over the weekend. By Sunday, transactional systems began failing mid-cycle. Real money, real clients, refunds reversed without record, subscription tiers downgraded without request, all within a closed system whose permissions looked normal, unless you knew where to dig. I'd left no malware, no hacks, just architecture designed to perform poorly under strain, settings they approved, conditions they ignored, contracts they skimmed and signed. Sunday night, an emergency board meeting was called. They used the same secure virtual platform I'd once helped them implement. I knew its vulnerabilities. I listened in under an alias granted as external tech lead. Compliance. No one questioned it. The CEO, a man named Charles Reinhardt, opened the call tight-jawed and furious. We're looking at seven-figure exposure, and I want to know how the hell this happened. Greg Ballard, still COO for the moment, replied with the calm desperation of a man trying to remember where he dropped the match. The systems weren't stress-tested properly after the last update. Catalyst Access provided the modules. Under your supervision, Charles snapped. Greg's mouth twitched. Their pitch came highly recommended. And who vetted them? Silence. Melissa from HR wasn't on the call. Her out-of-office auto-reply mentioned extended personal leave. I imagined her clearing out her desk in quiet shame, or maybe relief. Either way, she wouldn't be returning. Dinesh, the CTO, spoke next. The permissions were sandboxed, but there's trace activity suggesting deeper access was achieved. You're telling me they breached our environment? Charles asked. No breach, just access through approved credentials, configurations they implemented per the signed scope. Greg tried again. We brought in experts because you pushed for speed. They leveraged legacy modules in ways we didn't fully anticipate. Charles exploded. I don't give a damn about leverage. I want accountability. Someone signed the goddamn contracts. They had. Every clause, every setting, every layer of redundancy that failed when pushed, just like I designed it to. In the middle of the chaos, I found myself remembering a moment 2 years earlier, standing in the server room during a cold January rollout. The fans were humming. My fingers were freezing. I had stayed late to patch a deployment solo after the junior team clocked out. I remembered thinking, if this place goes down, they'll never know it was me who saved them. Now, they wouldn't know it was me who let them drown. The board meeting spiraled into threats and blame. Greg offered to step back temporarily to maintain optics. Charles didn't argue. Legal was brought in. Investigations were floated. I watched it all unfold with the detached calm of a man who had already moved on. They tried to contact Catalyst Access for support. The domain had been quietly decommissioned 2 hours earlier. The company? Legally dissolved. The founder? Never listed. The systems? Unrecoverable unless you understood how they were first built. And that knowledge? Left with the man they'd thrown out over lunch. By Monday morning, word had leaked. A data integrity issue, refund confusion, multiple clients suspending contracts pending investigation. Greg resigned before noon. His statement cited the evolving needs of the company. Melissa never returned. Dinesh clung on, but his credibility was shot. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. But I did update my whiteboard again. The final line now read, Phase 3, vanish. I closed my laptop. and let their silence speak for me. The lake's surface is like glass this morning. No wind, no ripples, just the clean, quiet mirror of a life rebuilt on my own terms. It's been 6 months since Artisan fell. I live in a cabin now, remote, minimalist. No plaques, no framed degrees, no display cases lined with the kind of awards they used to hand out like candy to the people who talked loudest in meetings. My desk is bare save for a closed laptop, a ceramic mug, and a leather-bound journal with soft edges worn by time and thought. No screens unless I want them, no notifications unless I invite them. I built my new firm with care, quietly. No LinkedIn posts, no launch announcements, just word of mouth, passed discreetly between people who understood discretion. I call us the architects, not legally, not on paper, but among ourselves. We're a small team, all ex-corporate talents who got burned by the same fire in different buildings. Archer joined first, then May from compliance, who left her firm after a whistleblowing incident she didn't ask for. Then Samuel, my old QA lead, fired for not scaling culturally after refusing to lie to a partner. We don't take clients who want flash. We take clients who need precision, privacy, and leverage. We fix systems, technical, operational, human. And we do it the right way, quietly, cleanly, ethically. But if a company's corruption runs too deep, we don't fix, we document, and let it collapse under its own weight, just like Artisan. I didn't follow the news cycle when it happened. I didn't need to. Archer did. He kept me posted with just the headlines. Falling giant, Artisan Technologies acquired in fire sale. No founder listed in vendor probe. COO disappears amid legal pressure. They tried to scrub everything, of course. Change the name, rebrand the platform, settle the lawsuits in arbitration. But data has a way of surfacing, and systems built on lies always leak. A private equity firm scooped up the remains for pennies. They gutted the leadership, salvaged what they could, and buried the rest. I never spoke to anyone about it, never claimed credit, not publicly. That was the point. But this morning, I received an email from a name I didn't recognize. A young journalist, probably fresh out of grad school, writing a piece on anonymous justice in the tech world. She'd heard whispers. Wanted to know if I'd be willing to speak off the record. Not for attribution, just context. She was polite, eager, probably imagined a dramatic sit-down in a smoky bar where I'd reveal everything with a knowing smile. But I've had enough noise, enough attention, enough of the world thinking volume equals truth. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the journal. I started the night they fired me. The first page still holds the ink stain from my shaking hand. I reread my earlier entries sometimes, not to relive the anger, but to remember the turning point, the cold clarity that came not from vengeance, but from design. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "They fired the man who designed the foundation, and were surprised when the house collapsed." I signed it. No name, just a signature. I closed the book and placed it back on the shelf. It belongs to a chapter that's finished now. Outside, the light is climbing over the lake. Archer's voice buzzes through the intercom I installed. Not a call, just a morning status update. New inquiry from Telgen Group, mid-sized under NDA breach pressure. May's vetting them. I nod to myself. We'll see if they pass. I stand, stretch, and breathe in the scent of pine and cold water. No sirens, no back-to-back strategy calls. Just the satisfaction of building something that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Some people write their legacy in code. Others carve it into concrete. I prefer mine whispered between the right people, in rooms no one photographs. I walk to the dock, coffee in hand, and let it go.